very important addition to our chapters on where we are sharing the best with you, the best, right? And I want to start bang on time. So we are literally bang on time. It's 9 p.m. We've been joined by these great guys from across. And hi, I've known them, two of them since they were born, and one in the last few years. So I can share a lot of their stories and what brought them there. But I leave you, this is a hotspot, guys. We want to be very casual, yet anecdotal narratives, which hopefully will inspire all of you to, track your own journeys. As a counselor, I'm asked a lot of questions in the last 30 years. What is the code to crack the Ivy League?
Okay, just before you continue, let me do a quick introduction for all of them, right? Hi everyone, good evening, and thank you for being here. This is Sonam Mundra, and I'm hosting this today with Dr. Jain. We have about 150 participants. I'm sure more will join in. We had about 450 registrations for today. So obviously you guys are very popular, and the different careers that you're doing are quite inspiring for all these young students. Can I request everyone to be on mute, please? Only the participants will speak as and when necessary. If you have questions, please post it on the chat, and I'll try and bring it into the discussion. So this is just some admin. Please post your questions on the chat, and I will take it from there while the panel is going on. Quickly, a quick introduction. So we have Alex here with us, who's joined us, and thanks so much, Alex, for coming on at this time. Alex has done his undergrad from Princeton, his MBA from Wharton. I was there for his graduation, and he's now working for McKinsey. So and he's also done, I think, liberal arts as an undergrad. So he's got a lot of different information for you, can share his experiences and how he chose his career path. Thank you so much, Alex, for being here with us.
Ivy League admission.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Can I now introduce Pankaj? Pankaj Dinodia has also joined us from Delhi. Pankaj has done his undergrad at Wharton, his MBA from Harvard. That seems to be the holy grail for a lot of you here today. Manvi, can you mute everybody, please, whoever's walking in? Can we
There are a lot of people from who have studied in US.
Guys,
is on the webinar.
I know what Ivy League are.
Can I mute them, please? Okay. So Pankaj has done his MBA from Harvard, and he's followed what you call the holy grail in India almost. And we have a lot of business students here today, and a lot of counselors actually who've joined us from across India. So thank you so many different people from academia, as well as teachers, professors, and students from all over who've joined us today. Finally, there's Atishay Jain, who's joined us from California. Thanks, Ati, for joining us. He's done his undergrad at Cornell and his MBA from Wharton. He's an engineer, so all you aspiring engineers can ask questions regarding that. And he's currently working for Facebook, which is also a very popular place, a career map for a lot of you youngsters out here today. And being co-host with me is obviously Dr. Jain, who has 30 years of experience in this field, and as always is the stalwart in the field of education. So without further ado, back to you, Dr. Jain, and if you could take this panel forward.
Thank you, Sonam. Thank you for being, introducing everyone. And we will literally jump into the hot seat. As a counselor, I've often been asked, what does it take? What does it take to crack the code to reach the Ivies? And now we have these three who seem to have cracked the code, because in 40 years, I have not been able to crack the code. What makes it, what doesn't make it? So let's hear from them two things. One, is it really necessary to crack the code? If yes, how do we do it? Right? So I'm taking Alex first because he has probably the most interesting stories to share. And please be as honest. These guys, we have audience for the panelists, for the speakers to understand. Our audience includes high school students who are aspiring to go to US for undergrad. And we also have a lot of engineers who want to go for postgrad. Maybe they're confused between should I do a master's or should I do an MBA? That's the standard confusion all the time. We have a number of students studying in BCom, BAF, accounting, finance, here. So a broad mix of students studying, aspiring both for undergrad and for postgrad. So Alex and Pankaj and Atishay, you will have to address probably both sections of your audience. So I'll begin with Alex, because you did the liberal arts at Princeton for your undergrad. And I've again, have this constant debate and dilemma. How do I explain what is liberal arts? What kind of courses did you take? What jobs did it lead you to? And what fun did you have?
Great. Hey, everybody. These are great questions. So first, let me start off by saying very honestly that when I was a high school student, my father wanted very badly for me to be an engineer. But sadly, I neither had the interest or the affinity to be an engineer because, very frankly, I just wasn't very good at math. So, but what I was good at and what I was most interested in was the convergence between politics and economics and how things were done and managed in other countries. So when I went to Princeton, I found myself drawn to a few different types of classes. So one were politics classes where I could understand how political systems evolved throughout history, starting in ancient Greece and ending, with modern American politics. I also took several classes on Middle Eastern studies, including Arabic. And I even spent a summer studying at the American University in Cairo, which Princeton very kindly paid for to make that possible for me. The other type of class that I took were different economics classes. So we're talking Economics 101, which provided a bit of an overview of the financial crisis, of the global financial crisis, which was occurring when I was a student in undergrad. To more economics and public policy classes that would cover, how would the political decisions impact the American economy and the global economy. And I think what these things taught me was they gave me a foundation for how to look at the world and how to think about a diverse degree of subjects, but maybe did not give me the hard skills that studying a science or studying engineering or studying math will give you. But the other thing that it taught me was how to tell a story, which I found to be very important in my current career at McKinsey and also in business school. And they taught me how to make a coherent argument. How do you structure, how do you use words to construct logic? How do you use words to help people to understand what your viewpoints are? And how do you use words to better communicate and convince somebody of something that they might not otherwise have believed? In terms of fun, I had a lot of fun in undergrad. One of the cooler parts about my undergraduate experience was having the ability to go take different classes, join different clubs and activities, and meet a really wide variety of people that I was not exposed to, folks like that when I was in high school. And I'm super happy to say that I'm still in touch with a very large majority of these folks today. And they're some of my closest friends. Dr. Jain, does that answer the question?
Absolutely. So I would go on to Pankaj and say, look, you also did start with liberal arts, but then you became more focused when you joined Wharton. Did you also have a lot of fun? I mean, Alex seems to have been all over the world while he was studying for his undergrad. And that seemed both intellectually and physically. And that seems very exciting. And did you have the same excitement and range of studying different countries and about different disciplines when you were an undergrad, Pankaj?
Sure, sure. So thanks very much for Dr. Jain for having me on the panel. And before I answer that question, just maybe 2 minutes on the journey that brought me to Wharton. So I was 7 years old when my father took me to the Harvard Business School, and we were standing in front of Baker Library, and he said to me that, you know, it is my dream that you go to Harvard Business School one day. And I kind of, you know, that kind of stuck in my head. I flew back to India, and then I went around asking people when I was 7 years old that, how do I go to Harvard Business School? And they said, well, you have to worry about second grade and fifth grade and 12th grade and all of those things. And then maybe one day you can go to Harvard Business School. Or the other way is you catch a flight to Boston, to Logan Airport, you take a cab and you go to Harvard Business School. I said, no, I want to go there for an MBA. So the path that was told to me was that, look, you study very hard, you get good grades. And there's a school called the Wharton School in Philadelphia. And you go there, you get good grades. Then you go work for one of the best companies in the world, which was either McKinsey in consulting or Goldman Sachs for investment banking. And then you go work in private equity. After that, for a couple of years, you get one of these heavy hitters to write you a letter of recommendation. And that's how you go to Harvard Business School. I said, well, that's pretty straightforward. So as I went through second and third and fifth grade, I remember talking to Dr. Jain through multiple years, asking her that what is the path? You know, I need to go to Harvard Business School at so-and-so age. So she would always tell me that let's focus on the task at hand. Let's work on your resume. Let's work on your extracurriculars. And let's try and build a life rather than a resume. And then whether you end up at Harvard Business School or not is not important, but it is you have to enjoy the journey towards it. And I'm very grateful for that guidance early on in my life, because I have to say that I've enjoyed every single, you know, as you know, none of the US schools, especially the Ivy League, are a cakewalk. But having fun while studying very hard is a very important part of it. Getting the right guidance from counselors like Dr. Jain early on in my life, which kind of paved the path, is essentially the way that I was able to get to all these places. And one distinct event that I remember, I had gone to some session where they said that unless you have a 1450 on your SAT, you can't go to Wharton. So I remember in our times, you had to write to the school and they would send you a physical application. And because my handwriting wasn't great, I had painfully typed out my whole application to Wharton. And I didn't have a 1450 on my SAT. So when this person told me that you can't get in, I went and tore my application. And I started crying that day. And I called up Dr. Jain and I said, look, my dreams are shattered. This person told me that because I don't have a 1450 on my SAT, I can't go to Wharton. So she said, you know, I'll say it in Hindi for the impact and then I'll translate it into English. She said, अगर आज हथियार डाल दिए तो जिंदगी में तो रोज पिटाई होगी. अगर आज ही हथियार डाल दिए तो आगे लड़ने का कोई फायदा ही नहीं है. Which basically means that if you give up today, life is going to give you 1,000 punches. If every time you fall, you're not going to get up, then it's kind of pointless to go ahead. You might as well forget about that dream. And I painfully wrote to the school again. I got the application. I wrote. I ended up getting in. I did apply to the College of Arts and Sciences at that time. You know, the school was very selective. They had only 3 seats or 4 seats for Wharton, and they had a much larger pool of applicants to the College of Arts and Sciences. Coming from a family of lawyers and economists, I decided that I would study liberal arts and economics first, and then if business was of interest to me, I would then transfer to the Wharton School. When I went there, I realized that, you know, my interest did lie in business. Having that accounting and finance background would allow me to get that job at Goldman or McKinsey and then follow the path. So I did end up transferring to Wharton in my second year. I would say I had a lot more fun than my business school, which we'll come to later. Undergrad at Wharton was very, very rigorous. You know, unless you're at the absolute top of the class, it's very difficult to get these internships, which then act as a stepping stone towards the final job and so on and so forth. So while I did have a lot of fun and I traveled the world, but a lot of my undergrad was focused in terms of, you know, interviews, internships, getting getting the best grades in the best possible classes and really learning and also making a great set of friends. So I hope long answer to a short question, but I just kind of wanted to lay out the path there.
No, I think that's really beautifully done. And he's one of the few people I know who really would ask me, okay, now what? Tell me. And it would be followed to the T. I've never, probably in 40 years, had probably 10 that I can count on my fingers who really followed the T. And I think the story is inspiring to say it's focus. It didn't matter to him at the end whether he went to Wharton or Harvard. He was just the best at everything. The school teachers were amazed, and he had probably a tough grandfather, a tough father who set up very high benchmarks. But in the end, he started enjoying it. And I think that was helped him to sustain. Otherwise, it's impossible to sustain so many years of excellence. So let me bring in Atishay now to share his journey and what he did, and how much was his decision making, or how much was he sort of pushed into his journey by his environment. Because remember, both Pankaj, why I brought Alex in, because he brings in, even though American born, and he still had to fight a father who wanted engineering. But believe me, in India, students may find it very difficult to fight parents who want engineering. Atishay, would you like to share your journey at that stage?
Sure. That's first off, thank you for having me on the panel. I think it's hard to follow two people like Alex and Pankaj Bhaiya. I think for me, my path was a bit different from both of them. I think as much as Pankaj Bhaiya followed your instructions, I didn't follow your instructions or your guidance. For me, I personally, though I enjoyed maths, I enjoyed science. So I think engineering was a great fit for me when I chose to do engineering. So I think in that sense, I wasn't pushed into making that choice. I think it was a very conscious choice. What was different for me though is I think going abroad wasn't my first choice. I think it was more of a we had set up, with your guidance, set up multiple plans, and I was actually doing my HSC in 11th and 12th, and I gave my SATs, gave my SAT2s, prepared for the CET, prepared for the IIT, prepared for many entrance exams in my 11th and 12th, just to keep options open, and then pick the best one that made sense, and that we could that we could plan for. So I think my journey was more of trying to see how I could take the best decision as being an engineer. Like, what's the best path for that? So I think 11th and 12th was a lot about planning and keeping options open and seeing at the end of the day what's the best one. So I think picking schools, where I only applied to 4 schools, right? I only applied to 4 engineering schools. I got into 2. I didn't get into 2. I got into 2. I got on the wait list for 1, and I didn't get into 1. And eventually I got off the wait list for Cornell, and then I ended up going to Cornell. So I think, but through the 11th and 12th, I think my thinking was, how do I prepare for the next exam, and how do I make sure I score the best grades in those exams, and so that I can have the best choices to make once all the chips land, in April of my 12th grade. So I actually prepared for the CET for the 2 years I was in HSC. I gave my HSC exam. It was about 2 weeks before my CET exam, which we'd been preparing for 2 years for, which many of you might be preparing for as well. And it was at that point that I got off the waitlist at Cornell, and then we decided that that's the best path forward for me. So that's how I actually made my decision to go to cold Ithaca, which I had never even seen snow before that, to be honest. So huge decision, huge leap of faith at that point to take that call. And then at Cornell, my journey was I was part of this program called Operations Research and Information Engineering, which was basically a math-based engineering, right? So it's about a lot of statistics, a lot of data science, and sort of working on complex engineering problems, but focus on these tools versus physics or chemistry as sort of your key pivots, right? So that was my engineering choice. I think that choice was more set upon me because I liked math more than I liked physics or chemistry. So that's how I chose that engineering, and I actually ended up really enjoying it. But to echo what Alex said, I think I had the opportunity to explore many different aspects of not just engineering, but I took classes. We had a really good hotel school in Cornell. I took classes in the hotel school. I took classes in the business school. I took a negotiation class with MBAs that were like 10 years older than I was and negotiating with them in classes. I took a class on Western political thought and history, similar to what Alex majored in. So I think the breadth of classes was something that I really enjoyed, at undergrad. And I think, it set me up more so than, building a career in engineering. It set me up to build a career in pretty much anything, right? It was, again, keeping those options open and being super skilled in basically nothing, but being skilled in everything. So it was like a jack of all trades kind of engineering degree. And the college experience for me was just setting me up to, as Alex mentioned, like writing. I struggled with writing in high school and in school. And so actually having to write papers in the economics class or in the writing class or in the history class.
My sister probably has an accent because I don't even know her. She barely goes.
She's British accent. She works now. I forgot about that part.
Sorry,
All good.
sorry about that. Yeah.
And so as I was saying, like, these are just life skills that I learned in undergrad that, helped me then figure out what my career would be after that. So I think my path was a bit more unstructured, but I think it's been, and like college was extremely enjoyable. I made a lot of great friends. They're my closest friends to date. They all gave speeches at my wedding. So I think, these are the things that you build as in undergrad is, you build character, you build friendships, and you build skills that, will sustain you for lifelong.
So I think many students in this audience who I've been counseling and saying, look, you have to keep all options open. Take the SAT, take the Maharashtra CT, take the JEE, and they look at me and think I'm weird. So here is a person who also did the same, took probably 10 or 15 entrance tests at the end of his 12th, and finally made it to a place where we didn't need all the entrance tests, but a lot of fun. And I think what the three boys are describing, gentlemen are describing, is also an index of what differentiates Indian education from international. Because this is again a question typically asked every time, that India is very good. So at no point will I ever stand on a pedestal and say, you should go because India is not good enough. There are different choices you make, and some of the journeys that these three gentlemen are describing shows you that you're not limited to one discipline. You can still major in engineering, political science, or a Wharton economics with business, and yet explore other things. So I would like to emphasize that we are not debating good versus bad. What we are debating is what is different. So it is for each parent and each student to pick what is different and what helps them forward. So Alex, let me come back to you and ask you that, what was so different about your application that took you to Princeton? I mean, I want to know now how to crack the code. If I can do it, I'll be a millionaire, believe me. And I'll have you all as mentors. So I just want to know, how do you crack the code from three of you? And more from Alex and Pankaj, because you seem to have cracked the code.
Sure. So before I talk about the code, I just want to make one comment on what Dr. Jain was saying around especially around the quality of Indian education. I just want to point out that, in my class at Wharton, like more than a few of the top students, a disproportionate number of the top students were educated in India, who did their undergrad in India. So I just want to call that out. Now the code. So I think I have to start by saying there probably is no code, or the code is different for every single person, depending on his or her strengths and passions. For me, I think what made a big difference in my application was I was able to tell a story that went beyond academic credentials, and was more, or not more, but also focused on like what are the things that I like to do, and demonstrating leadership experience and passion in those things. So, for instance, I think a significant part of my application was built around the work that I did at a relatively impoverished public school. So when I was in high school, I took Spanish. And during my free periods, I went to a public school that was nearby, and I spoke and I did some bilingual tutoring to kids that were probably around 8 to 12. And I also recruited students from my high school who spoke Spanish to come and do the same thing with me, and I founded a club. So I think that experience and showing that commitment to helping others was something that Princeton really appreciated. Princeton, whose motto is in the service of all nations, like that kind of volunteer experience to them probably stood out. I think another thing that may have stood out was, as I mentioned, so I ended up doing a lot of work in college on Middle Eastern studies. And as such, like one thing that interested me even in high school was global religions and how they, how they interwove together and how they were different, and like the different ceremonies and rituals and what those meant. So I spent a lot of time working on a group called the Global Religion Club, which was basically like the idea was that we would get together and talk about different religions and explore different religions, and go to these different events to learn more about like the philosophy and the practices of different religions. And that was something that I spent a lot of my junior year founding and building and spending time on. So I think showing those interests beyond just academics, where academics is kind of the table stakes, right? It's like the bare minimum to have a strong academic record. But showing, like that you are a person with varied interests and passions beyond just academics is something that universities, tend to look for and appreciate, and will help your application stand out from other applications. Even so much that I would guess that having these leadership experiences and showing community involvement will actually make up for applications that are maybe slightly academically weaker than other similar applications. So for me, at least, I think that was the code for undergraduate. For business school, I think the code was more around having a clear sense of where I wanted to go and the work that I wanted to do, and then making a strong case on why on how Wharton specifically would help me get there. So for like a little bit of a quick background, and I'll pass it off. So I work for McKinsey as a consultant, and I do a lot of work in renewables and in energy. And so a lot of my application to Wharton was around how I would get involved in the energy community on campus. So whether that was participating in the energy club, going to talks, helping to set up the energy conference, and taking classes on energy finance topics, energy topics, and just really making a case on how Wharton was a unique place that would be able to help me accomplish my goal of doing work in renewable energies, especially for a consultancy. I think really strengthened my application because it showed a clarity and a vision in a story that was very easy for the university to understand and say like, okay, yes, like we think that, this person's goals, that we can help this person to achieve, his goals. So I think that the code's probably a little bit different for undergraduate and for graduate school, and probably quite different based on, your likes, dislikes, and skills. But it's really about, telling a coherent story about who you are as a person, what interests you and what drives you, what motivates you, and then, how you will help to contribute to those elements when you're on campus.
Atishay, would you like to add? Because again, there is a big confusion. How much extracurriculars is good curriculars? Should we focus on a few? Is quality important? Is leadership important? Or is just doing a lot of things to show versatility important? So would you like to add to that?
Yeah. I would echo what Alex is saying here. I think it's about creating the story, right? If you look at application, right, the essay itself, it's about telling your story, and it's about building an argument for why XYZ school is a good fit, right? So if you're saying, I want to be a great engineer, and I want to be, do X and Y and Z. Let's say, Cornell's great in applied physics. Let's say, why is applied physics important to you? What you want to do with applied physics? And that's why you want to apply to that specific program or that specific college, right? And I think it's about building an argument based on, and the way you build an argument coherently is to say, this is what I've done, this is what I like, this is how I know I like it, and this is why, and this is what I want to do, and hence where I am today and where I want to be tomorrow, you are a great fit in the middle. I think that's basically like how you break this down into like a legal argument, and then make sure it comes off as a story. So I think that's how I thought of the applications that I built. I think less so for undergrad, because I think I had a lot of support for the undergrad application. For the business school application, I think that's how, I think I tried to structure more of what I wanted to say, more of what I had a background in, and how I thought, or where I thought I wanted to be in a few years' time. So I think that's how, I would think about the application, think about, having an experience that you actually care about, or having something that you can help you build your argument for where you want to be, after school. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think like I've had a post undergrad, I took a couple of years to figure out what I wanted to do, and I ended up working in social impact. So I think it doesn't have to be exactly, you don't have to land exactly where you think you would, but I think it's important to figure out what interests you and where you want to take that.
Pankaj, I want you in because you didn't really take time to figure out. You decided at 7-year-old that this was your path, and one of the few to keep that path. And yet you had a very interesting narrative and story to your application. So would you like to share what really made you, so you had the perfect Wharton undergrad, Harvard MBA. I mean, it couldn't get more perfect than that for most of the audience. And yet you remain, humble enough to say, I achieved it through various factors, and till the end you were a little bit unsure, will you make it, not make it. So would you like to share your story?
Absolutely. I think you can be Arjun, but if you don't have a Guru Dron, it's very difficult to be successful in life. So, just to put it in context for a broader audience, you may have the best story, you may have the best pedigree and whatever, but unless you're able to package it well, that resume, the essays, the quality of the rest of your application, the recommendations, all have to say the story, because the university has 7 or 8 sheets of paper to get a sense of who you are as a person. They have no ability to do this Zoom call like we're doing today. In our time, it used to be a 5-minute interview in person and 40 applicants, one after the other. But those 8 sheets of paper have to be immaculate, and you really have to package them well. So, having somebody like Dr. Jain to guide you, I was very fortunate that she guided me since childhood. But even if you can get to her by 9th grade or 10th or 11th, having somebody like her by your side, helping you craft that story and then package it correctly. Imagine if Sachin Tendulkar was told that badminton is a good sport. Imagine where he would be. So, understanding what you do well, but then putting it all together so that you're in the right space, you're in the right place, and you have the ability to demonstrate that ability to the school, I think this is very important. So just in terms of my journey, I was a naughty child. By the age of 10, I had broken my right ankle 5 or 10 times. I was pronounced physically disabled, and I couldn't walk up even the stairs in my school. And it really took an impact in terms of my confidence and my discipline and whatnot. And my grandmother, who inculcated the habits of discipline and hard work and focus in me, again told me that, look, everything in this life can be overcome. And it is the strength of your mind versus the physical body that helps you achieve your goals and ambitions. And I think by the time I was 11 or 12, I started doing Taekwondo, and I went from white belt to green and to black belt eventually. And I won the national gold in Taekwondo. I was an above average student, so I had decent grades in my SAT and decent grades in my school, but it wasn't anything which was wow. But I think my ability to overcome my weakness, physical weakness, and then I ended up teaching at a school for children with special needs. And I never in my wildest imagination could think about this story being put together so beautifully that Dr. Jain ultimately put together for me when I wrote my applications to Wharton. But how I was able to overcome my disability and then help others overcome their disability was really a strong foundation of my application for undergrad. Second thing I would say is that I had, great focus from a very early age. And I started writing to Wharton in 9th grade and asking them for books and brochures and whatnot. By the time I actually landed up on campus, you could blindfold me and I could tell you which building we were walking next to, which professors taught in that building, what time they would teach in that building, who were the Nobel laureates for each of the departments. So there was very intense focus. When you have such intense focus towards something in life, you know, the whole universe gets behind you to help you achieve your goals. But, you know, ultimately it came down to packaging to show my enthusiasm for the school. You know, what I wrote in those essays really mattered a lot. What the people who wrote my recommendations about me and my, you know, passion towards going to that school mattered a lot. And then ultimately putting it all well together so that, you know, you're not overstretching or, you know, you don't sound overzealous in terms of your ambitions and whatnot. I think so. Getting the right guidance, having the raw material and then packaging it well, I think both are there is no, it's a black box why these schools take one person versus the other. So it's a little bit of everything, but putting it all together, you really need a master.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really kind of you. Let me tell the audience that he's giving me a lot of credit because that's the way he is, but it is 99.9% his merit and hard work that has got him there. So appreciate it, Pankaj, but I know the effort that you have put in. So, you know, now I come to a very strange question to you all. That, you know, the parents listening to this are going to give a tough time to all their kids out there. They're not going to really have a peaceful time the next COVID. If these three guys can make it to the top Ivy, you can do it too. So I can see every dining table across Bombay and the rest of India. I can see many counselors from different parts of the country have logged in. I can see Nagpur, Indore, Kolhapur. We have somebody from Dubai, Bangkok, Hong Kong. Hong Kong must be very late just now, but they have logged in. So what I'm trying to say is that is Ivy really the only mantra to get into, say, let's talk jobs. Ultimately, education is a journey to a destination. Ultimately, it's short. Careers are more important. Where you work probably is more important. Now, you all are top of the line. Alex is working for McKinsey. Atisha is working for Facebook. And Pankaj has worked for Goldman Sachs, which is all three are gold standards in their categories. Were all your teammates and peers that you worked with from Ivies? So is it so necessary, or do you just have to be a good, outstanding student no matter where you go to make your journey? Because ultimately we are talking education, but sometimes I feel education at the end of it is just a journey. Destination is what you all are doing. So can you give a piece of candid advice about the peers that you had in your company or have now that are working with you? What backgrounds are they from? You've been, I'm sure you are in touch with your school students who didn't really make it to the top 8 or the top 10. Are they doing well in life? Is it so important? I'm sorry, I may be asking you to go against what you are saying and have achieved, but sometimes children need a reality check. So Pankaj, would you go first and then we'll go Alex and Atisha?
You know, great question. It's, I mean, I did go to Wharton and Harvard, but 99% of the people I work with today did not go to an Ivy League school. In fact, you know, just in terms of my Goldman class, there were 100 analysts. I would say 40% of them went to Ivy League schools. And 60% of them did not. They all did fine. I think more important is to be focused on what you want to achieve, having the right skill sets, having the right mentors in place, the ability to think independently and work hard. While these schools do place you in terms of, you know, getting that initial interview and whatnot, ultimately how you convert that interview into a job and how you convert that job into a career comes down to individual focus and discipline. And also, I would say luck plays a very important role. I have many friends in high school who didn't have the resources or didn't have the opportunities to go to the US even. I remember talking to one of my closest friends, you know, he makes these Jaguar fittings, one of the most successful bathroom fittings company in the world. The guy didn't even go to college, but, you know, he says, ab mauka milega, I would love to go and get a great education at this stage of life. So a lot of them, 95% of the clients I work with in India did not go to an Ivy League school. They went to some great schools, but they weren't Ivy League. I think it ultimately comes down to, your focus, determination, and a combination of factors that the school cannot necessarily help you or what. You have to have the right raw material and the drive and focus. Obviously, schools can help accentuate that. Ultimately, it comes down to the individual. Also, I will say is, you would rather be a strong fish or a large fish in a small pond than be a small fish in a very large pond. I have friends who went to Yale and other schools, Ivy League schools. I mean, I hate to say this, but they are struggling with their careers. Sometimes when you go to an Ivy League school, you have a sense of entitlement that, hey, I should be doing this, or I should be earning X million dollars, or why is XYZ doing so well and whatnot. You're constantly stuck. Versus I have lots of friends who went to small liberal arts schools who figured out a niche that they wanted to do well in, and they built fabulous careers. They're much happier than some of the guys who couldn't get that 3.6 GPA and then didn't get that, or missed that interview because the train didn't run on time, didn't end up getting that job, and then was so harsh on themselves because they have such big, lofty aspirations and ambitions. There has to be some check between ambition and reality. And sometimes you have to take a step back and think that, look, okay, I missed this chance, but with what I have in hand, what is the best that I can make out of this situation or this education? I look at some of the managing directors at Goldman. In fact, none of them were Ivy League guys back in the day. And even like I said, today, 99% of the people I work with didn't go to Ivy League. So I know there's a lot of pressure when you're growing up in India. I will only pay the fees if you go to an Ivy League school. But I would request the parents that, there is a world beyond these 8 schools. There are 50, 100 great schools in America, in the UK, in Australia. Send your child to a school where they will flourish, they will grow and become the best version of themselves, as opposed to trying to become Pankaj Janodi or Atishay Jain or Alex.
Yeah, Pankaj, you're next. You're going to join me in counseling. I'm going to record it and play this conversation again and again, because it's something I keep saying, and most parents look at me, oh, you've just teamed up with my son, and that's why you're saying this. But over to Alex, would you like to add to this narrative? What were the peers in your school? What did they do? And in your company, in McKinsey, because that is again a dream job. In the various dream jobs of the world, what gets you there? Is it only a particular type of school, or is it the person who's more important?
Yeah. So first, I would like to start by seconding everything that Pankaj said. I think that's absolutely correct. And I'll elaborate in a few areas. So one, when I look at my McKinsey colleagues, both the people that are my seniors, the people that are my juniors, I see an incredibly diverse array of backgrounds, from, probably 100 U.S. Educational institutions. Now that I'm in India, several different Indian schools, but the diversity is there. It is absolutely not only people that attend these 8 or 9 Ivy League universities. I found that the people who are both happiest and most successful around my age, so I'm in my early 30s, are not people that necessarily went to Princeton, Harvard, and Yale, but people that went to a school that matched them the best, and that they were able to discover themselves, learn, and grow in that school. That is, for me, the most important, is finding a school where you feel like you can be nurtured as a person, and you can grow, from a teenager into an adult, and, kind of foster your curiosity and grow your strengths and your talents. And by no means is the only way to do that by going to Cornell or Princeton. Now, if I look at, I went to high school in New York. If I look at a lot of my peers, many did not go to top 5 schools, but instead went to top 20 schools. I will say that the outcomes that we have had to date are very, very similar. You do not have to go to a top 5 school to be successful or to be happy. And in fact, many people who I had better marks in high school, went to college, became very serious students, started to explore their passions, and are now extremely successful. They just peaked a little bit later in life than I did in high school. And I think that one thing that really resonated me from what Pankaj was saying was this idea of entitlement, which I definitely do think that, you know, the Ivy League can breed. You know, it can breed this expectation that, oh, I went to Princeton, therefore I deserve this job. Therefore, you know, I deserve this job more than somebody who did not go to Princeton. And I think that is an attitude that very quickly leads to failure mode. And that what I've seen is that people who go to, you know, schools that are top schools, but not necessarily are the top 5 best schools, but have a hunger, have a desire to succeed, are scrappy, are resourceful. Those are the people that in the long term get out ahead. That being said, does going to a school like Princeton give you a little bit of a leg up, a small leg up early on in your career when you're about 22, 23, 24? Yes, it does. But that being said, there is a long time for people, you know, that did not go to schools like that to mitigate that and to discover themselves and to grow and to make up that advantage very quickly in their early to mid 20s.
Thank you so much, Alex. That makes a lot of sense. Atishay, you also have a unique background in the sense you did the typical higher secondary from Jai Hind College and yet made it there. And I'm sure you have friends who went to different places, did different things. What is your take? How successful are they? And what would you advise these young students who are listening in? And remember, they are high school and engineering students and undergrads who are listening in to your talk today.
Yeah, I think, you know, what Pankaj and Alex said, spot on, right? I agree with everything, really well put. So I won't even add on to what they said. I think they said it beautifully. I think from my perspective, right, looking at my peers at Facebook, all the great engineers that I work with, and Facebook is a very engineering-driven culture. They came from all across, right? A lot of them are, studied in China or they studied in India, have a great mind for engineering, a great mind for computer science. And so they can solve the biggest, most toughest problems, right? So I think a great engineer can come from anywhere, right? But a Harvard or a Wharton or, a Cornell might not produce always great engineers, right? So I think it's about meritocracy, especially in San Francisco or in Silicon Valley. It's extremely merit-based culture. Even if you make it, as Pankaj said, you crack the interview, you get the job, you have to convert that into a career, right? And I think that is where your passion, your skill all come into play, because everybody starts at the same level, right? You start at the same, either an analyst level or you start at the base level software engineer, and then you build a career based on what you can perform, based on what impact you can have, based on what big problems you can solve. So I think it's about we can continue to sharpen our axe in different schools, right? Build our skill set, sharpen our axe. And then it's about like when the tree comes, right? Then you have to show your skills there. Then you have to see, how I can maximize my opportunity here. So I think, school is just one part of it. In fact, I think most of the great engineers I work with, don't come from an Ivy League school, right? They almost exclusively don't come from an Ivy League school. So I think the merit there is extremely real, because for somebody like Facebook, in fact, for a lot of tech companies in Silicon Valley, there's almost this notion of, if you spent a lot of money at going to an Ivy League school, you might not be the smartest person here to make these decisions. So in fact, there's this counter culture of against Ivy Leagues, especially in Silicon Valley. Stanford is an outlier here, obviously, because there are a lot of folks there, but from Stanford around the Bay Area. But honestly, like there's definitely this culture of counter culture of, hey, you went to Ivy League school, man, you must have spent a lot of money on this, so you might not be the smartest person to make decisions. So I'd say building a skill set or building a career is a lot about depth of knowledge, depth of experience, and depth of functional skills versus school signaling. I think school signaling is just to get you that first interview, that first job. Conversion is all up to the person.
Yeah, thank you so much. So
If I may just add quickly to that.
Please do.
So given that we are in interesting times in the COVID world, I was working with a client recently, and the task at hand required me to, do something in Excel, put together something in PowerPoint, go photocopy some pages, fax something, a lot of the stuff that I did as an analyst. And, he looked at me and said, can you go photocopy this? And I said, sir, but I have 2 Ivy League degrees. I said, but you don't have them here. Who else is going to do it? It's either you or me. So, because we were humble and went through the trenches ourselves, your ability to put together stuff and do it quickly, it didn't matter whether I went to an Ivy League school or not. It was just that work had to be done. And rather than having a sense of entitlement that because I went to Wharton or Harvard, you're like, okay, there are 2 of us here, you watch these guys and I'll go do this. So, I think that can-do attitudes is more important than that Ivy League thappa.
Yeah. So thank you. I think that's been very, very candid about at this stage, because we are in COVID and you mentioned COVID where everybody has to multitask, probably being innovative, the Indian jugaad of being inventive has come into a most important place as currently as we speak. So, I used to always tell students, take up internships, volunteer, and that's the only way you can build your profile. And suddenly we found that, oh, it's COVID times and I'm already 10th and 11th. This is the only summer that I could have built my resume and now nothing is happening. Now what? So Sonam, let me ask you to jump in at this point.
No, so I just wanted to ask 2 questions to the panel. The first one is really how important, because you're all doing careers now, finally in your 30s, as hopefully what you enjoy doing, is do you think doing internships was very important just to give you an idea of what you would like and not like? And would you recommend doing internships to young students to just understand a career path or maybe just figure out what they're doing or learning? Quickly, if you could start, Alex, Ati, and then Pankaj.
Sure. I think for me, an internship was very important, not necessarily to discover the path that I wanted to go on, but to just understand what it meant to work. What did it mean to have a job and to get professional experience and need to, conduct myself like a young professional. Later on, when I was a business school student, I think an internship was very interesting. Well, for me, it was very important to understand if being a consultant was what I wanted to do, if this was the lifestyle for me, if this was the content that I wanted to work on. But for me, early on, my thinking is, internships are a good experience, but it's not a specific one. It's any internship is a good experience when you're very early on or just beginning your career.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Ati?
I would echo that with Alex. I think for me, it was literally my first internship, 18 years old, at Edelweiss Capital in the equity group. My manager was this VP and he was an ex-Navy guy. And he literally made me open the paper and read it for an hour every morning and see what the markets are doing, understand what the information we have and make sense of it. And I think one is just like learning of, going to work, what it means to have colleagues, what it means to do, to do a job every day. And I think the most proud I felt was I got paid by my first salary. It was a 10,000 rupee check. It was 5 figures. So I went, Edelweiss Capital, it was an Narromine Point. My father's office was in Narromine Point. Walked up to him and I showed him this check, 5-figure salary, beaming smile. So I think there's a sense of, that it's a sense of really like thinking about things that you never had to think about before, right? So I think, and that pride you feel by being a productive member of society.
Pankaj?
I think I'll quickly add to that. Figuring out what you want to do in your life is quite tough. I know lots of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are doing careers that they're not happy with, but they pay the bills and they keep them. They have a family, they have responsibilities and whatnot. So I think more important in life is to figure out what you don't like or what you don't want to do. And if you have the ability to do that through a 2-month, 3-month internship in different fields, then it's like a free opportunity. Like, why would you not take up an opportunity? A lot of these careers sound very sexy. Oh, I would love to be an investor, or I'd love to be an investment banker, or whatever it may be. But when you are there and you're sitting there till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock every night, putting together mindless pitch books and whatever, somebody comes and thrashes you in the morning. And do you really want to build that as a career and do that to younger people that come into it? I remember not to knock, I remember an internship where I went, and my first day of the job, my boss came to me and said, your most important role during this internship is to make sure that you get good snacks, good drinks, and collect all the money from all the senior people in the office. And every Friday, 5 p.m., if the snacks and food and drinks are not good, then you're in trouble. So I said, sir, but I go to an Ivy League school and this is a finance internship and I was hoping to make models and whatnot. He's like, yes, we'll get there in a few years. But once we have to see if you have a safe pair of hands and you can do all these basic things first. Sometimes a lot of these humbling experiences in life teach you, oh, this is definitely something that I don't want to do. Or when I'm in a position of power and I have some summer intern that comes to me and says, hey, can I go home? It's 6 p.m. or I have my birthday or whatever. You just learn from these things and you have the ability to be more compassionate towards people and whatnot. So I think internships play a great role. Like Dr. Jain advised me when I was young, build a life, don't build a resume. Don't do something because this will look good on my resume and this will allow me to get into Harvard Business School someday. Because you might not. Then what will you do? Will you regret all those years that you spent building XYZ job or career or slaving away in a job or a boss that you didn't like? So do stuff that you enjoy, follow your passion, work hard and excel in whatever you may decide to do. I think that's the underlying message.
So
that's brilliant, Pankaj. Thanks so much.
To this problems.
Yes. So actually there was, because like you said, and we've had a lot of students who are very concerned about this, like, because they can't physically go out anywhere and get an internship. They can't physically work for people. But we've had, there is a company which has come in, which was called Virtual Internship, which is giving very interesting internships to students. Maybe in government sector in Assam, there's somebody who's volunteered for social project for solar lamps. So there is a virtual internship program. Manvi's putting it on the chat box. In case that's of interest to you, sign up for it. It will start on the 21st of June. So that could be an opportunity for students who cannot go out of their houses, cannot go out, but still get a great experience and reach out to a wider audience and actually do some sort of work, good work out there. The other project that has come our way is from Skill Labs, which is also very interesting because they're doing, like Alex said, sustainability. They're working in the field with UNDP goals, working with shelters, animal shelters actually, because animals are not really looked after during this COVID time, at least in India. There are other organizations in environment which have come across who said that we'll give a nice project to young students, because these organizations, don't forget, also need your help, because you're so savvy with the computer, you're so savvy with reaching out to a wider audience. So it's a win-win situations, especially for people in stressful situations like migrant workers and things like that. So there are some sustainability projects which are also come up. And if there is something of interest to you to do over the summer, please sign up for those as well. I think that will be useful for you looking at what all of our panelists have actually said over here. Any other questions?
Really good. So we will give like a few seconds for the audience to actually link onto the project sites. If you want, you can sort of at least register for both. And then Manvi, I request you to send details of these to each one, maybe send them a video, and so that they can make up their minds about what to, and what else do you have in store for us, Sonam?
And another quick, so the other thing we thought was listening to what Pankaj said and what Alex said and the story that is. So I'm thinking maybe a next webinar which we could do. So we've already done one with admission panels of the admission officers from Brown, Cornell, and UC Berkeley. Today we've done it with alumni. I think another session that we could probably do is do one on just applications, and not even applications, essay strategies. Just how can you tell your story better? And so we'll put up a link over here. In case you're interested, you could sign up for that webinar. And that will also be a webinar that could probably give you an idea of how to tell your story. So that could be a strategy one which you could sign up for. Manvi will put up the link in 2 minutes. Moving on, I just wanted to quickly ask you, and this is a question which I've been reading actually from the chat which has come up. When is the right time to do an MBA? Is it still important in this day and age to have an MBA, first of all? And two, when is the right stage to do it? Since all of you are MBAs, if you could quickly throw light on the value of doing an MBA and the value of when is the right time to do it. Because a lot of students are in their graduation. So do they, go out straight, work? Is it still necessary? Is it okay to just get skills and work first? I mean, when is it, and is it still necessary in this scenario post-COVID? Do you still think it will have value? I'll start with Alex Pankaj and then Ati.
Sure. Is it necessary? Probably it is not necessary. For whatever you want to do, you probably do not need an MBA to do that thing. However, is it valuable? Yes, it's absolutely valuable. It's valuable in two respects. So one, for me as a liberal arts student for my undergrad, it was very important for me to get some more quantitative experience and practice on my resume, and to also learn some of the quantitative fundamentals that I was lacking as a young professional, that anybody who is an engineer will learn that in undergrad. So for me, getting that quantitative foundation was very important. Secondly, it was very important in terms of the connections I made and the networks and the friends that I made. So I'm very pleased to say Atishay is a very dear friend who I met in my MBA, and that was 5 years ago. And he was a groomsman at my wedding, and those relationships are very important to me, even now. And and it's more than just making friends, but it's also folks that you could discuss your careers with, who you could bounce ideas off of and get their honest take in terms of as you consider what the next step is in your career. Now, I think the last question I heard was, when do you get it? So the answer, which is a bit trite, is when you're ready for it. I personally would recommend getting more professional experience before you go. I went a little bit young. I was 25. I wish I went a little bit later because I think that you kind of get out of it what you put in. So if you have more experience, especially life experience, going in, you're going to learn more from it than you would, with less experience.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Pankaj. What age were you when you did your MBA, Pankaj? And how much work experience did you gather before you went for the MBA?
Sure. So I was 26 when I went. 2 years of investment banking at Goldman Sachs in New York, and a year of setting up their private equity business here in India. And then also my grandfather called me one day and said, you only studied at all these big schools and worked at all these big companies. Why don't you come work in the family business for a year, so that you can decide if you want to marry a nice Jewish girl and settle abroad in New York and continue to be a partner at Goldman Sachs, or whether you want to come back to India and join the family business. So I definitely spent a year working in the family business and living at home and realizing all the things that are great about a joint family system. And then I went when I was 26 and came back when I was 28. In terms of
Atishay, what people would like to know, you changed from engineering to
when you should go, I think that choice is yours. Harvard has it.
Sorry, Pankaj, continue. Sorry.
Continue, can't hear you.
No worries. Sonam, did you get what I said, or?
No, I didn't hear after you said that when is the right time is not clear. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so I think that's an individual choice. There are lots of people who came to Harvard Business School straight out of undergrad. There was a 2+2 program that a lot of people applied to, where they get in and then they have the ability to go do whatever they want for 2 years and come. I think it's an individual choice, but you should go when you have some sort of experience and you have some sort of direction where you want to go. Either you want to change your career, you want to get into a new field, or you should have a valid reason. Just because everybody is going and it's a great place and it's a great network, those are very loose reasons. Then you end up going there and you make 200 loose networks or connections, and you graduate, and by the 5th year of your reunion, people have forgotten what you're there to. Versus going there to change your career or focusing or making good solid friendships, so that you're actually giving groomsmen speeches at your friends' weddings and whatnot.
Yeah.
Ready to pick up the phone at 12:30 and say, "Bhai, madad kar yaar. Yeah, I need this," and people stand behind you. I think that is more important, and that's what you should try and get out of an MBA, as opposed to just a thappa and some loose 200 connections on LinkedIn. That you can get anywhere, in any job or whatever.
Great.
Ati, you changed your track from engineering to management, and many engineers who may be in this Zoom room today may think, oh, then that's a waste. Do you think that was a complementary education, or did you completely change track, and did it complement your education?
I think the MBA was a really great choice for me personally. I think, as I mentioned, I went from being an engineer to working in social impact investing, to doing the MBA, to working, did my internship at a no-name small startup that's doing very well right now. It's one of the most profitable startups in Silicon Valley right now. And then moving on to consulting, right? So I think the path for me post undergrad was, non-traditional. If you go to the MBA schools, you'll see there's a non-traditional path, right? There's people who come in from consulting and banking that makes up the bulk of folks. But I think there's people who come from non-traditional backgrounds, and I was one of them, right? So I think for me, it was a great exposure to have it. I think the question you asked about like going from engineering to business school to doing something in business, I think it depends. If you want to be an engineer and you want to be an engineer, then you should do engineering, right? And then you should be a really great engineer. If you know that you want to be you like the skills an engineer has, but you don't really want to be doing engineering work when you're 40, then I think you should figure out soon enough what that might be. So I think it's okay to go into engineering and switch, but that's what, and worked really well for me. I think business school was a great experience. I met folks like Alex, and I got to work in places like consulting after that. I got to work at startups. I'm working at Facebook now. So I'm really happy with how the business school, the business school was a stepping stone for me to explore different facets of what I might be interested in, and then find what I'm really, really interested in to build my career. So I think for me it was, and again, I was also 26 when I went to business schools. I think, having those like 3-4 years is good. I know a friend of mine from undergrad who was a year older than me in undergrad is going to HBS this year. So I think, he built a company, he was a CTO of a company, founded it, and now he's decided to go to business school. So I think it's totally up to you when you want to do it and when it makes sense. So on the timing issue, it's extremely personal. Usually most of my class was, between Alex's age and my age, was like 25 to 28 when you started out.
Thank you so much, all three of you. I'm reading chats and they're like, oh my God, this has been the most informative chat ever. And because it's very rare that we can have 3 students who've tracked their journey and are willing to share the narratives with young aspirants now. And so Sonam, would you like to add or ask any last comments from the 3 of them?
No, I think they've actually covered all of it. I'd just like to reiterate on one point which I picked up from what Pankaj said, that it's absolutely okay to do an internship with your own family businesses. Because a lot of the time the students feel that, it has to be a Goldman or it has to be, like a naam hona chahiye resume mein, to I can go forward. But one of the best experiences could be in your own family business where it's really doing well. You can learn from it and maybe want to come back. Because I now know that after Goldman Sachs, Pankaj is now a CEO of his own company, which is a platform which he's started as an extra service or a diversified his own family business into a capital business, which is now called Dinodia Capital. So he himself has really learned and is now an entrepreneur because of that 1-year internship. Probably gave him an overview of what his family business does and has added more value to it. So a lot of our students who come from family businesses who are here, it's absolutely fine to intern with your own family business. Look at it as an option. And then if that's not what you want, then try something else. But not for the sake of trying something else, simply because, that could be of value to you. So I think I really appreciate the panel for giving such candid advice, honest advice to these students who are here, even being in the positions that you are, which are very aspirational for these young parents and students here, but very, very apt advice. So I think that was very useful. People who are still here, if you found this session useful, put a thumbs up or put a clap sign on your reactions. Let's see some reactions coming in to see if you enjoyed this session today. We do a lot of these sessions. We've done 6 of them already, and we're loving the feedback that we're getting. So we're hoping to do more and more, so that we just use the lockdown period. Has actually been amazing for us. It's been hard on a lot of people, but for students, I think if you use your time well, it's great. You could be like a Pankaj and do deep dive research. You should even know who the professors are, which building they are in. If you're that kind of focused child, do your research now. I can tell you all admissions people are sitting absolutely free and willing to answer questions. So take advantage and reach out if you're that kind of a driven student like Pankaj is. Or if you're willing to explore fields like liberal arts, history, pol science, go the Alex way because you couldn't do better. And if you are a little bit sure on math and you do like engineering, follow your parents' dreams. I mean, that can be equally good for you. So thank you so much to the panel who've been here. And it's been really a pleasure having all of you here on board, especially on a night, on a weekday night. Thank you everybody for coming in today.
To the night, so it's taken on more than, and I'm so glad to see that the students are still there. Normally people leave halfway through, so we've been able to maintain and capture attention. And so thank you, and hope to see you again, and we may rope you in again. The feedback looks like, oh my God, we can continue talking through the night.
Okay, just before we end, I forgot to check. Any of our counselors who've come and joined from different schools, do you have any questions which we didn't raise today? Any quick questions anybody wants to ask?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So my question to any one of you is that what changes in education system we need to make so that we can have more job creators than job seekers in our country?
Wow, that's a deep philosophical question.
Should be able to answer that because he's actually a job creator.
Yeah,
and,
Pankaj.
Yeah,
would you like to take that question?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think more than education, it is the kind of upbringing that you have, the values that you have. I remember Dr. Jain used to always say this to me, that do something that will change the world around you. It doesn't need to be big, but it has to have deep impact. And for me, that was always having the ability to create something on my own. While it would have been great to work in America and get a high-paying job at Goldman or whatever, but coming back to India, joining my family business, and then finally creating my own firm, and showing that there are great opportunities to create businesses and opportunities in India, was always a dream that I had. So I think it comes down more to the individual as opposed to the education or the school or whatever. If you look at, like Atisha said, if you look at most of Silicon Valley, these people didn't go to XYZ schools or had very fixed careers like I did, but they've been able to go there and build some amazing businesses. There's a concept called polymath, which means that you have ability to pick from different fields and see how these things all come together. And I think the greatest entrepreneurs in the world are today not just very focused on one field, but they have the ability to pick the best from different genres and fields and put it all together to create businesses and create a lot of value. So, I don't know, I have a more direct answer.
Yeah.
But
so what I understand from Pankaj is that the education system doesn't need to change. It's the person who needs to change.
Yeah.
If he uses his education thinking, I can use these skills only for a job, then that's what he'll do. The same skills can be used for job creation, and the same skills can be used for all the mindset change of the participants, of the students.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bijal, anybody has a question?
Yeah, actually, if it's possible, I'd like to ask. A lot of our students are curious about, is there something that you feel that you gained in particular from an Ivy League education that you think maybe you wouldn't have been able to do if you weren't at that particular university, or if you were at any other non-Ivy university?
Who would like to take that?
Atisha, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, maybe I can take that. I think for me, to be honest, skill set wise, education wise, I don't think I learned something very different at Wharton or at Cornell. I think the only thing that maybe I can call out as a side, something that's helped me personally is on the network side. So all the jobs that I have or have taken in the last, X number of years, I've gotten some kind of connect via an alum, right? So I got my first job from a Cornell alum. I got my summer internship at business school from Wharton alum. I got my next job in consulting through the Wharton network. But I think that's the only thing to open a door. But I think to walk through the door and to actually make that count, I think that's, again, totally up to the person. So I think, as I mentioned, like it might open more doors for you, but how you succeed in that door and whether that door makes sense for you, that's something that students will have to work on themselves.
So per se, what I understand is that it really doesn't matter which school you come from. It's the skill sets you bring to the table that are important. So Ivy doesn't really give you that. once you're in, do you really remember it's an Ivy, or is it just like any other school?
I can just say this: when I was in Cornell or when I was in business school, I think, like especially at Cornell, like nobody has any, like all the things that you wrote in your essay, you don't really have time for that because there's just so much to get through from a course load wise, from all the things that you have to do just to get by. I think so. I think the pressure is more off from what your goals are to what you need to just do for the exam next week or for the project in 2 weeks time. So I think mindset quickly shifts once you're in, and it's the same for all colleges.
I would like to ask that now that you all are in such successful careers, and tomorrow when you will be people who will be hiring or recruiting, would you give equal importance to Ivy and non-Ivy?
Yeah, Alex, you are going to be the McKinsey recruiter quite soon. So what would you do? Would you have bias, or would you take the best man for the best job?
I would definitely try to take the best person for the best job. And for me, an Ivy versus a non-Ivy would not really factor in. It would be much more about like two things. One is the skill set that the person would bring, and two is the attitude, determination, and resilience that person would bring. I would try very hard not to look at the university and not to let that bias me.
Thank you.
I would just add to that. Sometimes, I mean, I hate to say this, I went to 2 Ivy League schools. It's almost, if I was recruiting and somebody, they have that air about themselves when they walk into an interview, it's almost off-putting that, because in the first 30 seconds, they're like, oh, did I mention when I was at Harvard? And you're like, Arey, yaar, why did you have to mention it? So, it's like Alex said, it's the person, it's the attitude, it's what they bring to the table. Obviously, with great connections, you have the ability to get the interview, but how you convert that interview into a job and finally a career, I don't think any of my clients know that I went to Ivy League schools or even remember. Sometimes I have to tell them, sir, मैं photocopy करूँ? I went to 2 Ivy, like I said. So,
Yeah.
I just like to add one more point to this. I think a lot of firms are even trying to break this monopoly that Ivy League schools have in terms of getting the connection and getting that first interview, right? So companies like LinkedIn, Google, Lever, these are all ways to meritocratize the opportunities that people get. So I think even in a few years time looking forward, like I think that extra bump that an Ivy League has to open a door for you is probably, like, people are actively working to make sure that advantage is diminished, advantage is more democratized. So I think a lot of companies are looking at the Ivy Leagues and targeting how they can take away the moat that it enjoys right now.
Yeah. So the aura is going to be just around the person and not so much around the university, which is a good message, guys, for you all to absorb, all of you in the room and those who are listening. The message that I've got is that you need to be the best you can be, and then places will fall into place, rather than trying to overstretch and get into places where you are a little misfit or out of your league. So as Pankaj says, try and be the big guy, doing a lot more things with your time at university, rather than all your time in the library hoping to catch up. Last comments, anyone? This is now joyful time. You can talk to each other or give last tips to these. Still, we have a room full. We have a packed room. Surprising. It's way beyond my bedtime. But yes, I'm also bright and energetic. COVID has done that for me. I don't sleep at 9 o'clock any longer. So yeah, last comments from anyone. Any piece of advice, anyone can jump in at this stage.
Can I ask another question here, if
Yes,
that's okay with the panelists?
Yeah.
So looking back, considering all of you have done both your undergrad and postgrad at Ivy League universities, looking back at the time, back when you were in high school, right now, is there any advice that you would give to high school students that I wish somebody had told me I needed to prepare for this particular thing? I didn't do that, and I felt like that disadvantaged me in some way at university. So something which high school students can do right now to prepare themselves for that Ivy League experience, or just college in general, not even specific to Ivy?
I would say college in general, not specific. Just preparing for university. What you would have liked to know the first day you entered.
I'll take a stab at it. I think realizing the importance of failure and that you will fail many times in life, but the important thing is to get up and fight every time you fall. I was told that multiple times, but I wish somebody had drilled that into me, because sometimes when you make it to a good school, you feel ki, ab life set hai. I have now come to this school and now everything is a rose walk. But every day you get up, you're like slapped and you fall and you get up and you have to fight again. You will miss that job interview, you will bomb an exam, you will get things wrong in your job, people will scream and shout, you will build a company and it'll blow up. Like, these things are just bound to happen. It happens to 99%. I'd love to find a case study of a person who's at the age of 40 for failing for the first time. Like, those people don't exist. I wish somebody had drilled that into me when I was in high school and said that this is not the end of life if you don't get into this school or you don't get this job. I was so focused that this is the path, I cannot see left or right. If this doesn't happen, my life ends. I wish somebody would have drilled that. I would have lived a little bit. My resting heart rate would have been much lower. I would have been a much more calm and relaxed person. My wife and kids would have appreciated it. And my parents probably a little bit more. Rather than all, my father used to say, if I hear this word Wharton one more time, you're not allowed to sit on the dinner table and discuss it. So I will just tie this in with my parting comments also, that, often either kids create that stress on parents that I have to go to this school and my life is over, or parents create that stress that unless you go to an Ivy League school, your life is over and whatnot. Enjoy the journey. Ultimately, all this is predestined in any case, not to make it a philosophical discussion. But, you do your best. And then whatever happens is, you did your best and leave the rest to God. Whether I went to Wharton or somebody went here and got this job, and that doesn't matter. All of us have a unique journey. Idea is to enjoy that journey and get the best out of the opportunities given to us. I remember, last 30-second anecdote. I once asked Dr. Jain when I was applying to Harvard Business School that, what can I do? How can I change the world and whatnot? And she said that, it doesn't matter. You could be sitting at your computer and you create something and that changes the world. Why do you have to go and, bridge the peace between India and Pakistan or figure out how to win an Olympic gold medal? Like, that is not the goal of your life. You have to figure out what is the goal of your life and try to be the best at it and then tell that story to the university or whatever, as opposed to trying and, living in somebody else's dream or somebody else's shadow. So I'll leave it at that.
Really, really well said. Well said.
Very well. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Alex,
perfect answer.
Add to that? Closing comments from you?
Yeah, I would say for me, it was two things, and it kind of builds on top. But don't be afraid to try new things, right? Go explore the different clubs. Go take classes on topics that you've never heard of but sound interesting. I mean, college is a lot about self-exploration and self-growth, and you're not going to grow unless you put yourself in situations that make you a little bit uncomfortable. The second thing is make sure you know how to do your laundry and make sure that you can feed yourself. Those are two things that are very important.
Very important, I think, especially for an Indian student going abroad. So please feed what Alex said.
Next is cooking competition. Let's do a cooking competition. We've done every kind of competition. Let's have a cooking competition and let all these youngsters make a video of cooking. I think that is a survival skill that we must first test, which these children are saying, I wish somebody had taught me to cook before I boarded the flight. So let's do that. Let's have a cooking competition sometime next week, right?
Done. That could be something else we do.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Does anybody Atish, you want to give your last comment?
Maybe I can add very quick last comments. I think to the laundry point, honestly, my biggest laundry tip came from Pankaj Bhaiya when he told me he only had black socks, because even if you lose one sock, you always have the other pair. So it's like I had 15 pairs of black socks when I was an undergrad, and this is true. For all 4 years of undergrad, I only had black socks, and I never lost a pair because I didn't know. I didn't know any better. So there's one tip for you. I think my closing comments though is what I've learned being in America for these many years is, which is different from what we learned in India, is one, you can ask for anything. So if you want something, you should find somebody to ask for help to do something that you want. So I think always be open to asking for help, because people are there to help you if you need it. And the second is, if you really want something, keep asking again and again. And a quick anecdote on this is that my cousin recently got into school and she wanted to defer by 6 months. And I think she said, oh, you know, the university said no the first time. I said, this is America. You can ask n number of times. Just keep asking them, call them 4 times a day, 5 times a day. And eventually they will give in if you really believe it, if you have a good point to make. So I think one is ask for anything and keep asking if you really, really, really want it. So that's a piece of advice that I'd share.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so
Brilliant,
much.
brilliant piece of advice. I think that's very candid. And I think I must tell you, panelists, this is the 6th webinar that we've done. And we have never extended our time beyond an hour. We start bang at 9 and we end it exactly at 10. And we have never had so many participants still listening in. At 10:30, they're still here. We've got still 100 people listening into you. So obviously it's been a very engaging panel and people are still wanting to hear what you guys have to say. But I think we should now end it and thank our panels for taking such a long time from their evening and obviously morning there in California to join us on a working day. Thank you everybody for coming in, and we'll end the session today. And we'll obviously bring in these panelists again if you have further questions or if they can add value to you guys. Thank you everybody. Thank you Alex. Thank you Pankaj. Thank you Atishay. These guys are sitting in 3 different cities and joining us. So thank you everybody for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jain.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you.